That's fine. Okay, so now we move to item 23, the draft council submission on the Productivity Commission paper on local government funding and finance. So we've got staff to come to the table for this one. And what I might do is just ask staff to speak to this at a high level, and then obviously we'll take some questions, and there may well be other matters that people are wanting to raise as well. So maybe if you'd just like to give us a high-level introduction, and then we'll move to some questions.
Okay.
The Productivity Commission has been tasked by the government to look into options for local government finance and funding. This is the first review of this magnitude into how local government is funded since the Shand report. They have produced a issues and options paper, which Solgum have responded to with a very comprehensive submission. The council submission is seeking to support the Solgum submission, and if there are specific issues that the council would like to raise, they will have the opportunity to do that when the Productivity Commission comes and gives a presentation later this month. So there are some options that are clearly going to be more achievable than others, but I don't think anything's off the table, and all suggestions I think will be dealt with by the Commission thoroughly.
Great, thank you. So now let's move to questions. Phil.
I can appreciate that we're going to be talking with the Commission, and that makes sense around our local issues, and it'll be helpful. But I just wondered why still we might not have flagged some particular Christchurch issues in this submission, and like examples might be the particular challenges which we have with our infrastructure in terms of funding. Our local transport issues might be an example, and that I guess is two. But so I wasn't quite sure why we hadn't at least flagged some Christchurch issues, so that when the Commission come to talk with us, they'll know what we're going to be an idea of some of the concerns.
The key issue was the timing of it being sent out. It was sent out just prior to Christmas when we were engaged in the annual plan, and then of course there were people on leave, and it was really, we struggled to try to pull together a presentation in the time available, and that was the key problem. We then looked at the Solgum one and decided the better option was just to endorse that, which as staff we do, and address the issues with the Productivity Commission.
I can appreciate the timing, and that is the other point I would have made is, like, we frequently rail really against all of the new standards which government have imposed on local government, and this submission, I presume Solomon doesn't take that approach, and I understand that we're looking at what can be done, but I guess the time constraints that this kind of like discussion from the Productivity as an example, Commission as an example, where in fact we've got really limited time, and that's a big cost to people. So I'm not sure what else. Other councillors may have some points too that we might like included, but I'm aware there'll be a fast cut-off date as well.
I mean, if I can say through you, Mr. Chair, that part of what we've flagged in this paper is that there's nothing stopping us pulling together, and we were hoping today we would hear some things from yourselves, that we can at least put together something so the Productivity Commission are not surprised when they arrive. They do know what it is we particularly want to talk to them about, rather than just endorsing what other, Solgum, all of Government New Zealand have said, and we can certainly do that in the time available.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, thank you. Vicky.
Because there's quite a lot in the Solgum report. So recommendation, for example, number 16, the Commission recommend further consideration of taxation of water pollution and water extraction. Really interesting recommendation. Does the water extraction taxation apply to community use water or just to private use water?
They haven't defined that.
No, they haven't. That's the problem.
No, and I mean, but I mean, again, that is part of what we could easily raise as in conjunction with the Commissioner. I mean, we've already asked for an extension. They're not going to review it till June. If the meeting is held and summarised and sent back, I feel we're still within the time available.
And the further increases in fuel excise, so we're seeking a fuel tax, for those of you who weren't so keen last time, and the extension to other forms of vehicular energy. What are we intending to tax? I'm assuming that's not electricity.
Again,
I'm assuming it's hydrogen or something.
Again, I think Sorghum are raising those at a principles level rather than at a specific taxation of
no, it's a
X, Y,
100-page
and Z.
report. They've been quite specific.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know what I'm approving here, and I don't like approving things on faith, especially to anyone.
Well, we can always go back, of course, and approve some and not other bits. I accept your issue. I mean, we have discussed with Sorghum. We were more focusing on, or I was, can't speak for Gavin here, sorry, but we were more focusing on the bigger issues they're looking to address, which is the working together on well-beings, the addressing a joint approach to climate change, the fact that tax improvement funding doesn't work or betterment isn't an option. We were more trying to focus on that bigger stuff, the fact that, for example, the Crown should pay rates on their property because they don't.
Yes.
To me, if a lot of those were addressed, well, certainly the Crown, a lot of the smaller stuff would actually not be a problem anymore.
I agree. There's some very good things in here. The Climate Change Adaptation Fund is very good. The fact that the Crown should pay rates is very good. What they don't stipulate, though, is should everybody else pay rates. So some people here may have views about churches paying rates. They may differ around the table, but I'm assuming they've included that they should also pay them. And I just think most of what they've said is very good, and they've said go back and look at the previous work, of which there's been masses, and they've talked about how, what was it, that rates are up 43.5% in the decade from 2008. Household living costs are up 15.1% across the country. And then they've done the projection of what rates will do and how clear it is that rates are not a good funding source. But then I'm not completely clear on what they're suggesting. So a water tax for private extraction, I'm totally fine with. A water tax for community use and drinking water, I'm not okay with. The Crown paying rates on their properties, fine, but the council may want to debate whether that applies to everybody. I'm not okay with taxing electricity for electric vehicles in any way, shape or form, but I'm not sure what they mean by it. I don't think they've told anything about Christchurch in here. The only example they've given of Christchurch is that we put sensors on rubbish bins. And given the experience that we've had of facing a disaster and the massive impact that has on your financial ability, and the only way that we were able to deal with it was that we owned a lot of companies, I think there's some very important things that we should be saying in it.
Okay.
So I'm getting a sense, just from the couple of lines of questioning that we've had so far, that we in many ways would prefer something, or there are some views that we would prefer something that was a little bit more bespoke Christchurch, and that there are some aspects of the Sorghum submission that we quite like, in fact possibly many of the aspects of the Sorghum submission that we quite like, but other things that we may be less comfortable with. That possibly speaks to a situation where simply endorsing essentially simply endorsing the Sorghum submission may not be the best way to go. I notice in the report we're saying that we've got an extension until March. Are we really up to the wire on timings?
Yep.
Yes.
Down to the wire on timings? Yep. So what are our choices? We approve this today, or have we got time to make changes to it if we wanted to do, and if so, what would that look like?
Well, I believe we have. I believe we could ask for a further extension on the basis of feedback from, and while it perhaps doesn't reflect well on staff's ability to manage it, it's still better to get a better submission back that reflects what's being thought of. Now, in order to do that, I think we'd probably need to arrange some sort of a workshop or to hear what the key issues are, and flag it to the Productivity Commission, who are here in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, okay. Or maybe put together a small group to work on it, or... Yeah, okay. Have a think about what might be a suitable way forward on that as we move through the rest of the questions. Have we got other questions on this? Anne?
I just wanted to clarify what Diane, would you mean a workshop for the full council?
Well, I'm saying if people seriously, well, no, because there's always difficult to manage. And
Right, so just...
I'm saying if the people have clear, strong thoughts, that we take those on board and work to prepare a response. And we advise the Productivity Commission that that's what they're doing. They're in the process of going around visiting with councils. So clearly they're still in the information gathering mode. And we just basically appeal to that in our response.
Yep, that's fine. Anne?
No, I think they're talking about two different sorts, and I think they're trying to drive behaviour.
Yeah. So we're wanting to text things that will change behaviour for sustainable.
Yes, towards the sustainability, and
those other texts would change behaviour just in text.
Yeah, it's the concept of betterment and land tax that Solgum have said shouldn't be a priority.
Thank you. So just coming back, were there further questions? Dion, did you have something?
No.
No? Okay. Just coming back to the thought of how we might progress this from here, if we were going to have a workshop of interested councillors to provide some advice that you would then put into a changed submission that took that into account, would that changed submission then need to be brought back to a council meeting for the approval that we were going to be giving today?
yes, I believe it would, yes. Otherwise, it's not reflecting the whole council, is it?
Yeah, all right. And your belief is that we could expect to get a further extension of time in order for that to occur?
Yes, I do think that, because they're clearly interested in what people think, and I mean, I think they're looking for bigger and more robust answers back. We found it very hard to reply directly to their, directly to the questions they'd asked, because it was quite hard to get involved in in-depth answers in something that was almost... And I think if we go back and say that, they had no problem last time when we asked for the request for the extension. They just said, yep, sure thing, straight away.
All right. And should we let that extension be after the Productivity Commission come here and we meet with them?
Yes.
So that anything that comes out of that meeting can then be crystallised into a submission as well?
Yep.
All right. So if we can get some sort of a resolution that... so we've got something here. Request staff hold a councillor workshop, and whoever comes, that's fine, on the Productivity Commission paper on local government funding and finance prior to the meeting with the Productivity Commission.
That's councillors' meeting.
Council, yeah. So the council meeting, yeah, the council meeting with the Productivity Commission. Yeah, maybe we put seek an extension up front. So request staff seek an extension of time for the submission.
And if it's not forthcoming, go back to
Of time for the submission. Maybe we say seek a further extension of time, actually, because that's the truth. And hold a councillor workshop on the Productivity Commission paper on local government funding and finance prior to the council meeting with the Productivity Commission, and then what are we saying? Then we're saying that needs to come back to council for approval. And present the final submission to council for approval. Further extension time submission over council.
Just get an extension, B, hold a workshop.
Yeah, that's
C.
good. And then C, bring the finals. Yeah.
Will it all depend on whether there's an extension?
Further extension of submission over council works on operation. Yep. Yeah. All right, so that's what we want to happen. In the event there's an extension of time is not provided, do we need to say what we want to happen then? When is it actually, like at the moment it's due in March?
It's due today.
Today.
It's due today?
Yes.
Right.
So we can go back to them. Well, I guess you have no option but other than to do the Part B, which is to have the workshop and focus on the things that really matter to this council as opposed to endorsing the whole of the Solgum submission.
So if the further extension of time, though, is not approved, you are then left with no resolution from this meeting to submit anything and something that we've asked you to do that you're not able to do within the time frame if the extension of time isn't approved.
No, I am still able to do the Part B, which is have a meeting with the councillors to understand what they really want to raise with the Productivity Commission at the end of the month.
But
That
then
can
we
still
wouldn't
be
have
done.
put in any formal submission at all.
No, you won't have.
But it'll be too late, it's due today.
It still will be too late anyway.
A kind of ad
So
hoc
if we approve this, what we're saying is we don't want to go with the original recommendation, which is that we put in a submission based on the Solgum submission, approving the Solgum submission. And I think just the questions that I'd heard already suggest that there is a level of discomfort with doing that.
Could we change it to holding a workshop being A, because we want to do that no matter what?
Yep.
And then B being seeking extension of time for submission.
Yep.
And if granted, bring a new draft
Yeah,
submission.
so swap over A and B. But I mean, it's still, if they were to say no, it still leaves us in a position of having not put in a submission. But if the submission we were going to put in is something that we may not be comfortable with, then we may prefer that anyway.
Staff have probably got to steer on the bits that we're not comfortable with. So plan B, which I don't think we'll need by the sound of it, would be to support the Solgum submission and take out the bits that we don't support.
I think we've received advice from staff, which is that we're highly likely to get the extension of time.
Yes, yeah.
I believe you will, but Brendan's just suggested to me the alternative is for a staff submission to go in which reflects the results of the workshop and the discussion with the Productivity Commission, and it then doesn't need
That
to come
still
back.
would be
We're
later
talking
though,
about
wouldn't it?
today, what we do today if we don't get the extension.
Well, I agree. Unless if we don't, then you can't put anything through today. I agree.
When will you find out?
Today, when I ring him.
You want to ring them now?
All right.
Can I just ask a question too? That on the Climate Change Adaptation Fund establishment, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we put that through as a remit last year for local government conference. And so we need to add some, if someone can find out if that's correct, but I'm pretty sure we did, we need to add that reference to that and add in a line about urgency around that. Because that should have been established years ago, and the sooner we get it going, the more effective it will be. So that's my suggestion on that. Yeah, so I don't know what happens to remits when they are passed by local government. They seem to go into thin air, but if we can call on them and highlight them, because it does add a little bit of extra oomph to that particular line.
All right. I think what might be useful would be to see whether we can get an agreement to the extension before we pass these resolutions. Yeah, so why don't we just leave this one deal with other items on the agenda, and then come back to this once Diane's got the answer on the extension of time, because that way we'll know what we're dealing with. And if we do need to come up with something to submit today because we can't get the extension of time, then we can deal with that at that time. It sounds as though we're pretty confident we'll get the extension. Yep. All right, that's great. Okay, thank you. So we'll just leave this for the moment and come back to it once Di's made the phone calls and got the answer. All right, thank you. So we'll come back to that one.